never get tired of that. That music's so great. Hey, listen, thanks again for joining me, Derek Lane, your host for the podcast, Fast Lane, Podcast for Success. So glad you could listen in, and welcome. Hey, thanks for all of the folks that's been tuning in and been listening, and welcome to folks that are just finding this podcast. I think you'll find a lot of information that is beneficial and helpful to you. So thanks again for joining me. This episode, we will talk a little bit about change, how to articulate change in your life and why you need to change, why you don't need to change, but just change in general. I think you'll get some information that will be helpful to you. So with that, let's get started, shall we? Okay, well, thanks for joining me. As I said, I appreciate it. And this week, I promised no little barking dogs in the background. Didn't realize that was so prevalent until it was after the fact. So we'll not have that in the future. Okay, listen, change is a subject that a lot of us don't really think about a whole lot. I just want to start out by saying that change is it's an unnatural occurrence. It's not natural to our bodies. It is kind of a hard thing to embrace oftentimes. It's a hard thing to develop. Change can come about voluntarily or involuntarily. Involuntary changes are, let's say that you're let go from a job. You didn't ask for that change, but now you're stuck with it. It can be very stressful, right? Involuntary change could be the loss of a loved one, the end of a relationship. Involuntary changes are probably the hardest changes. And I don't know how many times I've heard in my life when people are faced with involuntary changes and they move forward from there. At the time it feels like it's the worst thing ever. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? How am I going to go forward? This throws all of my plans and goals into a scrap heap. I don't know what to do. And then you talk to that person 3 months, 6 months, a year later, and you find out that I couldn't believe my good fortune. It was only after the fact that I was involuntarily made to change that I'm on a better path. I'm on a righteous path. I'm good. I'm much better. I'm in a better place. And this is awesome. Had I stayed on the old path, I'd probably still be miserable and not realize it. I'd probably still be in a place that I was struggling and didn't realize it. See, I think even in some of the most obscure instances where we're forced to make changes, involuntary changes, I think on a deep level, oftentimes your subconscious guided the principles of that change, unbeknownst to your conscious mind, doing things and just looking at things in a different way that cause changes. So voluntary changes are changes that we embrace, that we take upon ourselves. Sometimes voluntary change is something that we're much looking forward to. A promotion, getting married, having a child, winning the lottery. So those things we're happy, we look forward to. And then there are the changes, the ones that I really want to talk about, the changes that we make that sometimes feel so uncomfortable that we're having a hard time with it. A change that says, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to make this change? How should this change look? How should my world look after this change? But these are the changes that we put in front of ourselves to challenge us, to challenge our modus operandi, who we are, our perception of who we are. These are the changes that can be so uncomfortable you don't know where to start, and you're not even sure why you're doing it, but you know you should do it. Changes can be very healthy. What it does is it forces your mental state to take charge, to embrace differences, to embrace a different way of thinking, a different atmosphere, if you will. It challenges. And challenging ourselves is a healthy thing to do because it allows us to stretch as human beings, to learn more, to be more, to have more, to educate others, to help others stretch and be, have, and do more. If the benefit is so self-righteous and so self-centered, it's generally not a benefit at all. Generally, when we face challenges and we take these changes and we embrace them, we make them ours and we learn from them, others learn from them as well, because you're there as a teacher, a scholar of life, to show others. So it becomes very important that you brush away those tiny little doubts and tiny little fears in the back of your mind to go ahead and accept changes. As long as they're positive changes, no one wants to make a change for the worse. No one sets out to say, hey, I'd love to be incarcerated. Hey, I'd love to be, an alcoholic or a drug-addicted person. I'd love to have a negative habit. No one wants that. Everyone perceives themselves as having, a positive lifestyle. Who they are is positive. Now, whether they are or not, but at least if that's our goal, that's the starting point. Changes are healthy for your mental state. They help you grow as a human being, as a father, as a husband, as a spiritual leader. Changes are always going to teach you something. Even the negative ones will teach you something. But stay away from the negative changes. Go for the positive changes, please. So when we grapple with changes, what are some of the things that we can do to ease the burden of changes? Well, if you've been listening to my podcast, you know that I'm a huge fan of pencil and paper. Pencil and paper save the day for me all the time. It helps me direct my thoughts, direct my attention to the things that are important. I write down the true questions, and then I allow myself to come up with the true answers, and I write them down. The simple act of writing down will get rid of the fog and haze around your confusion and why you're not seeing things clearly. The simple act of putting pen to paper and writing it out will dissipate the fog around your decision making, around your processes. Anytime, it goes back to, I think, one of the things that intrigued me about pencil and paper is going back to the Benjamin Franklin close technique in cells. If for those of you that are not familiar with Benjamin Franklin closing technique, he would basically take a sheet of paper and draw a line down the middle, and on one side he would write pros, the other side he would write cons, or cons and pros, however you want to do it. And with your prospect, which could be yourself, you write all the cons. What are the negative things? What are the consequences of my actions, my purchase, or my decision to do something different? What are the consequences of my actions? The cons. What are the pros on the other side of the paper? What are the pros of my actions? When I write down the benefits, the features and benefits of my actions. And almost always, the pros will outweigh the cons. So when you see it in clarity, you stop wrestling with, what if. It's in front of you. You've made your decision very clear on a piece of paper. As long as it's a good choice, it's a good challenge for you, you're going to see the benefits outweigh the cons. So that's why I like pencil and paper. I've learned that technique a long time ago, and it just seems to be magic to me. And I think that people that will say, yes, that makes sense to me. Yes, I understand what you're saying, Derek. And I will do that. And then they never do it. They think they do it, or they're going to do it, but they don't do it. I'm telling you, each one of you should have a pad of paper handy. A pad of paper handy to where you can jot down things. And I've talked to you in the last series, the 3 R's, about having, a recorder or a device that will come in handy to you when you have a fleeting idea, a moment in time that you want to, let me write that down. I don't have a pencil and paper on me. Some way just to record that. Everybody's got a phone nowadays, but some way just to jot that down. Don't let that moment pass you by, because you may not remember it, and yet it was something so important to you that you should have. And then when you come back and you come home at night and you sit down and you open your journal, your writing log, whatever it is that helps you. When you open that up and then you start to write down and play back those moments, those important little mental notes that was important enough for you to want to remember. And as I said in the last podcast, it may not even make sense to you right now. It may be something that you just go, don't know why I had that thought. Write it down anyway, even if it's insignificant. And here's the important part. Review your log. Once a week, once a month, whatever it is. Review the log. Go back 6 months. Go back 3 weeks, 3 days. I don't care. Review your log and those mental notes that you've jotted down. Because what may not have made sense at the time, when you go back and look at it, you may go, aha, that's why I had that thought. That's why I had, the thinking that I had at that time, because it benefits me now in what I'm doing now. Or it benefits someone that's very close to me, that has asked for my help, or maybe just needs my help. The benefit is always there of recording your thoughts. Recording your thoughts, putting them on paper, putting your action plans on paper. And dare should I say at least, putting your goals on paper. Within Living in Change, I want to touch on another podcast subject that I was instrumental in bringing about, is the happiness factor of living in the now. Whatever you're doing, it's perfectly normal to have goals and aspirations. And if you track them, you put them on paper, and you make them real, you double, triple, quadruple your time effort of achieving these things. And when you start to see these things come to fruition, you realize how important it is to have these things on paper. And when you make that a way of life, it just benefits you so greatly. But to the point of saying the happiness factor is living in the now. Give yourself permission to live now and not project your happiness in the future. Not project your outcome so far out. Yes, goals are in the future, but if you start to perceive them as being accomplished now, then when they come about, it's a natural change. See how that works together? When I talk about change and I talk about living in the now and living in the future, or your goals and aspirations of being in the future rather, not living in the future, when you tie everything together, it becomes so natural that the uncomfortable feeling of being in a change mode is suddenly very comfortable, because you've accepted it when you first created the idea. You accepted that when you created the idea and you start living in the persona of having that change already have taken place to you. Once again, I will quote one of my favorite Shakespearean quotes. Assume the virtue if you haven't not. Assume the virtue if you haven't not. Which quite easily means act as if. Go ahead and act as if what you want is occurring to you right now. Act as if you are that person that you're striving to be. And once you take that persona and you make it yours, you own it, change is inevitable. And it's an easier change, not an uncomfortable change. Our brain pathways are not disturbed because we've already put into motion and place the pathways that take us to the place that we want to be. So you're not jumping from an interstate to a county road. You've already laid the tracks and you've already mapped it out. You're on the fast lane, my friends. Ha-ha! Brought that one in there, didn't I? Okay, well listen, thanks guys. I think this message is taken, hopefully it's taken with you, and I appreciate